Hi, this is Terry Kavanagh, and you're listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast.
Yes, welcome back, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. This is episode 195, and you are with your High Priest of KHONSHU, Ray. As always, g'day. And tonight, we are back for the first half of the week again for our idle chat. So we'll be discussing the Kavanagh Legacy, which is a discussion on Terry Kavanagh's legacy of Moon Knight, in particular in the Mark Spector Moon Knight run. It's a very unique 30-odd issues, but yeah, definitely get into it. And joining me on this journey is a very special guest host, Rotten Tomatoes critic and social media manager for The Spool, Tim Stevens. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, it's absolutely an honor to have you also here as well, Tim. Tim and I, we I guess we'll discover, learn a bit more about each other as we go along, but this should be very exciting indeed. I know Tim is a Moon Knight fan in his own right. As always, a big thank you to our sponsors, the Patronies. So for those of you that do listen to the show, thank you so much. But also, even more thanks to those who throw a bit of coin our way, the Patronies, and they get listed as co-producers or executive producers on each of the episodes. So you too can be a Patronie. Just check out the Patreon details, a bit more about that later on. So a big thank you to Daniel, Justin, Derek, Wayne, Jordan, Josh, James, Russell, and Anthony. A huge thank you, guys, for everything. It's really, really appreciated. Also, sponsors Fringe Knight by Daniel Doing, an original indie comic based on Erie, Pennsylvania's very own mysterious superhero. You've heard me talk about this before. Go check it out. It's an indie comic. It's great. Get in touch with Daniel. He's in the community as well. All fun, all good. As well as Hello Headphones, empowering gamers to play at their best, and Dreamland Comics, the superhero superstore. So a huge welcome, Tim. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's daylight saving has just occurred there on the East Coast for you over there in the US, so a little bit earlier than you'd expected.
A little bit, but that's all right. You're worth it.
Excellent. And look, I guess for the benefit of the listeners and for myself as well, how about you tell the listeners a bit about what you do, and also off the back of that, how you kind of got into Moon Knight.
Absolutely. So, as you noted, my name's Tim Stevens. For about a decade, I was a freelance writer for Marvel.com, and I was billed there predominantly as the resident therapist because in my day job, I am a therapist. So I would do these things called psych wards where I would essentially play the act of a therapist in the Marvel Universe and psychodiagnose the characters as a way of previewing future storylines in their books, for, like I said, for the website. So that was the bulk of my comics experience in terms of writing. Right now, I am, as he noted, I work for The Spool. I'm the social media manager. It's a pop culture website, movies, TV. I also write reviews for them. And I've been doing that for about a year and a half now. And it's a great site. Fully set up by the editor-in-chief, Clint Worthington, decided he wanted to have a site of his own in addition to his own freelance work, and he's got a great a great group of writers for The Spool, myself excluded, of course. And it's been a real joy to be able to promote a lot of work of people who might not have their voices heard if not for Clint having the site. So that's been really important.
Oh, that's yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, the first thing that kind of popped into my head when you did mention about The Spool is, I mean, do you follow a lot of the MCU Disney Plus TV shows, the Marvel films?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of the MCU in general, and my next sort of gig with the spool will be doing recaps for Winter Soldier Falcon starting next Friday. So
you bloody
I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. And I take it then you've watched WandaVision?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Safe to say, did you like it? Did you enjoy it?
I really did. I appreciated the fact, I know it's frustrating for a lot of people, but I appreciated the fact that it refused to be what people, even including myself, wanted it to be. You know, I would have loved to have seen Mephisto or Doctor Strange show up, but I liked that it stuck to itself. It was fully its own thing. I really appreciated that. So I would have liked the other version that, we imagined online, but I thought it was really true to itself. Okay. And as a therapist, I really appreciated the sort of emphasis on processing grief and PTSD that related to a lot of that stuff.
No, for sure. I mean, I've been listening to a couple of podcasts, and they've been going through episode by episode, and this whole thing about grief and going through those stages was quite fascinating. And I'm kind of like you as well. It's so weird. It was more so this series than I guess other series that came before it. Even if I'm to say the Netflix shows, I really had more expectations on WandaVision and so as you said, I fell into that trap of maybe not having those expectations met, but kind of looking back, it's like, well, it's still I mean, I still enjoyed the series thoroughly, and it's still kind of, I guess the fact that it made me theorize so much is testament to the effectiveness of the show.
Yeah, and you're talking about the first time you got really into it in terms of theorizing and things like that. I think part of that is also that A, it's a TV series as opposed to a movie, and B, it's been so long since we had MCU content that I think a lot of us got super enthusiastic about it and just sort of poured all our attention into it in a way that we didn't necessarily do for the movies yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. And you mentioned also as well, Marvel.com, the Psych Ward. Actually, I remember reading many of these. So it was great. I of course, read the Moon Knight one. That was very, very cool. Did that actual, I guess, exercise, an article that you wrote, did that open your eyes a bit more to Moon Knight, or had you been a fan already?
I had been a fan already, but I think it helped me take in the full scale. The first Moon Knight series, or sort of exposure to Moon Knight, was the round robin Spider-Man arc, involving his former sidekick Midnight and just a ton of sort of very early 90s crossover characters. I think it was Night Thrasher and his skateboard and that sort of thing. And, that was a good series to meet Moon Knight through, but not a great series to get to know him, if that makes sense. It makes it clear how cool he is visually and things like that, but he has a ton of history that doesn't really get included in that series. So going back and doing the Psych Ward and, diving all the way back into the mob stuff and things like that, it really helped me give me a fuller picture of the character.
Yeah. Look, I think there are a few loonies for sure. I know I'm going to shout out Josh Johnson, probably pursing their lips and nodding when you were talking about that. Round robin was a personal favourite to many, I guess, loonies, as we call them, Moon Knight fans. So no, that's great to hear. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was visually, aesthetically, and just the cool factor. He had all of that in the 90s. But hey, look, in the 90s, it was all about just looking cool, wasn't it? Ponytails,
right? Absolutely, trench coats. That was a huge thing of it.
Yeah, but actually, when you start diving underneath the skin of a lot of the characters, and we'll get to it with our idle chat, you can tell that there's a lot more thought that a lot of the creators brought to the characters, like Moon Knight himself. Dare I say, even Frenchie as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as we get into it. So, Loonies, what we're going to do for our idle chat, as mentioned, it's a weekly topic of just any random subject related to Moon Knight. Tim and I, we're going to have a look at the Kavanagh Legacy. So this is the Terry Kavanagh Legacy, predominantly in Mark Spector Moon Knight, and this ranged from issues 35 all the way to 60. So almost half of the whole series run, Terry came on board, and I think it's fair to say, Tim, he kind of moved and shaped Mark to quite an extent, certainly from the first half. Yeah.
there's some really interesting concepts that do and don't, without sort of, I guess, teasing a little bit the next episode of the podcast as well. We're getting into a storyline that picks up some of the stuff that actually shows up in the Kavanagh run, so it's kind of a nice relationship to the two. Besides getting to hear my voice, if you listen to the next episode, you also get to pick up some of the threads that Kavanagh created here. Yeah. But it's a really interesting thing because I think it takes it in a direction that Moon Knight hasn't, since being effectively relaunched with the David Finch drawn series. Going forward. A lot of what Kavanagh does, those aspects of Moon Knight haven't been as emphasized. So it's pretty interesting from that perspective. I don't know how you felt about it. But.
Oh, no, for sure. I think it's, for me, it's a very unique... I mean, again, I say this a lot about every Moon Knight run is quite different from the others. So each of the creators have paved their own way, which is what I love about the character. There are obviously common threads. You could say that to characters, to any character to a certain extent, but you really do get this kind of, dare I say, a lot of the fans may be divisive on certain runs. It's quite polarizing. I mean, we're talking about the Bendis run, the Bemis run, and certainly the Kavanagh and the Mark Spector Moon Knight run. So plenty of stuff actually was introduced by Terry Kavanagh. We had the good fortune of speaking to him and his good mate Howard Mackey on the show, and they gave us a bit of a behind the scenes of it all. They had big visions with Mark Grunwald of where to take Moon Knight. So this was quite interesting. Let's just quickly go through. We're not going to dwell too much on them, Tim, as well. We could be here all night, all morning. But beginning off, issues 35 to 38 was the Blood Brothers. This is an awesome arc. I love this. It had the Punisher in it. It was all about actually like a retelling of Randall Specter, sorry. And it also had the first appearance of the Shadow Cabinet. So Terry's starting to, I guess, play around with the canon. Randall seen in a different light. He's only really been seen, I guess, before in the Hulk magazine 17 and 18, where we get a snippet of their history. But what did you make of Randall Specter's return, so to speak?
I really appreciate the fact that it does take what is a fairly small piece of the mythos and really dives into it and expands it. It's sort of sad going forward from there that Randall doesn't really get touched on a whole lot because he does have the capacity to be kind of, one of your opposite villains, like a Venom to a Spider-Man, that kind of thing. And you don't see that as much. He doesn't tend to pop up a whole lot going forward. Although, again, to tease the next episode, the issue we're covering in that, he's a big part of. And it's interesting because I think when you talk about Moon Knight, sort of the best part of his life is his childhood. Everything after that, things get rough in a hurry.
Yes.
And so it introduces both a character from that time, so there's the tragic aspect of that, but also, it hints at the fact that perhaps things weren't as rosy as you might believe, or that, he's sort of, Moon Knight's lot was cast a long time ago, even before you might think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite amazing that, to paint the picture for some loonies who may not be familiar with Randall, I'm sure a lot of you are, there was only a glimpse of him as the Hatchet Man in 17 and 18 of Hulk magazine, and the glimpse of history we had was that both brothers at some point were mercs for hire. There were some crazy shenanigans ensuing where Randall kills Mark's girlfriend at the time, Lisa, I believe her name is. Mark kind of really gets back at him, disfigures him. He wakes up in the hospital, grabs an axe, as you do, and starts hacking away at nurses. So that's pretty much the extent of Randall Specter. So it's interesting, in Blood Brothers, Kavanagh's reconstructed this, and the big sweeping thing that he's done, actually, to bring the character back was to say, hang on, that wasn't the real Randall Specter. All the way back in the Hulk magazine, the Hatchet Man, that was someone else masquerading as Randall Specter. So very weird, but you go with it. And we get this further development of that he was a merc for hire as well with Mark, but he was over in Egypt as well, crazy stuff as well to me. Like, he even arrives at the Temple of Khonshu on the other side, that sort of stuff. So he's eyewitness to Mark's resurrection. But it was very interesting having the real Randall here, resurrected. Well, I don't know where he was before, but by Nephthys. She's a big leader of that Egyptian, I don't know I can't remember what they call, cults of the moon or something. Knights of the moon. So Randall's big here, and as you said, Tim, we will get into, he gets kind of retconned again in later on in, I guess in 2010. We'll get to that. To that. Also, as well, the first appearance of the Shadow Cabinet. So, interestingly enough, here, Tim, I don't know, what did you think? Any thoughts on the Shadow Cabinet as a thing for Moon Knight?
It's. I think it's an interesting concept. It's very much a throwback to the Shadow. The Shadow's whole thing was he had this group of people that he would save them, and then they would become sort of helpers for him. You know, he was a cabbie who he count on to drive him around and things like that. So it sort of echoes that idea, which is kind of fascinating because the whole multi-identity thing that Moon Knight has going on is very much a reflection of the Shadow as well. If you look, Jake Lockley is equivalent to that cabbie chauffeur. It's just that Moon Knight does it all in himself. Right. So there's sort of an externalization of something that was already there. And it makes a lot of sense if you're a hero, right? That you would want experts in the field, even if the field is, breaking and entering, people you can sort of reach out to and say, I need support with this, or I don't quite understand this. Going forward, unfortunately, I think Kavanagh introduces it and then ends it by the end of his run. And it is the kind of thing you feel like if the book wasn't ending, if they had longer time, it would have been far more incorporated and far more used. So it is ultimately, I think that's more potential than execution, but it's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do like the idea of them, the cabinet coming from all disparate backgrounds. It's totally anonymous, so to speak. They are as holograms in the, in their meetings. They don't see Mark Specter or Moon Knight. They just hear him. And so it's all kind of very anonymous in that way. Interestingly enough as well, Tim, so Terry Kavanagh did say that he was playing with the idea that at the very end of the series, the Shadow Cabinet were, I guess, extensions of his dissociative identity disorder, I guess, some part of his mental illness, which would have been interesting to see where he took that. But yeah, in the end, he kiboshed the idea. I mean, they disband by, I think it's issue 55 of the whole run. But yeah, certainly very interesting. They all had their own little quirks and stuff. There was like a very Sigmund Freud-esque kind of guy. There was a guy from, there was like a felon as well. So they're all very, they all bring their own different experiences. And it was a nice, I guess, spin also as well on accumulating knowledge for Moon Knight. He had his Jake Lockley streetwise thing. He had his Stephen Grant entrepreneur billionaire, and he had his Mark Specter. But now he had this collective, so to speak, of people that he could draw different expertises from. I thought that was quite interesting. Moving on, after that, we get Impending Doom, which was a two-parter, a great thing, with Doctor Doom. I think this was a very 90s thing of just, let's just throw in a big Marvel character, Tim, and Doctor Doom versus Moon Knight. Who would not want to see that? I'm glad I did. But a lot of fun there. The artist, Gary... I can't pronounce his name, Quapitz. He did a very good job. But yeah, I think Ron Garney was the artist at this time, so he kind of stepped in to do those two issues, which was pretty cool. Nothing too much happened there for Moon Knight, other than there's this, I guess, ongoing thing, Tim, of Mark's body being infected by that virus.
Right. So yeah, that sort of gets its biggest introduction here. That Doom notices it and offers to help him in exchange for the locket that he's searching for, essentially. Yes. And Mark ultimately gives him the locket, but refuses Doom's help. which is either noble or prideful. It's a little unclear which.
Yeah.
But we get the idea that, because he's also gotten a new armor costume, which is supposed to help him with it. And what what Doom says is that it's far worse than we thought an issue or two ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point there as well. The new Adamantium Armor, which is, again, very, very 90s. Let's just, soup him up. He's got Crescent Dart wrist blasters now.
Right.
He has souped up weapons. It's all pretty fun. I personally like the Adamantium Armor. I wouldn't mind seeing it back. How about yourself, Tim?
I do. It's interesting. A lot of the armor we got during those periods was very different than their costumes. You get the Scott McDaniel drawn Daredevil armor. It's very different than the red costume. You get the Hawkeye armor, which is just a nightmare. And again, very different from the costume. Moon Knight's armor, there is the wrist gauntlets that you notice and a couple other things, but for the most part, it's very similar to the usual white suit. So visually, it's not that different. But yeah, it's an evolution of the costume. It's got some neat bells and whistles, and it's clear Kavanagh put some thought into it, because a lot of characters in the next 10 to 15 issues reference the fact that he has all these bits, and it's a source of annoyance for some. It's often used as a taunt as well. They mock him for the fact that he's using these things, as opposed to just fighting them. So, it's clear that it was... yes, it was the zeitgeist at the time, but also that Kavanagh spent some time thinking, like, okay, why does he have this, and what does it mean, and making sure characters notice and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I wonder also as well, with the upcoming few issues to come and the advent, so to speak, of a lot of these big crossover events like the Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, that there was maybe a need to upgrade Moon Knight a bit. If he was to kind of mix it amongst all these other superheroes, maybe he needed an upgrade, because let's face it, in the Doug Mensch run, admirably so, he's very down to earth, and he's almost very ambiguous as to what, other than a guy in a suit, what makes him a superhero, you know what I mean? Like he can fight well, but he doesn't display anything over the top. That's not until you get into like Fist of Khonshu,
right,
all the way back. So I think maybe they tried to, and as you say, the zeitgeist as well. I think it was ripe at that time for to soup up on weapons and adamantium. Like Wolverine was a big thing, so adamantium, you get that in there. Yep. And so that bled into the crossover, Infinity War crossover. So that was Mark Spector Moon Knight 41 to 44, a very interesting little period here, Tim, because we get Moonshade, who was kind of like, for those that know, Infinity War, doppelganger to the hero, but he was kind of carving his own path. He wanted to, rule the world and the universe as well. So forget Magus and Adam Warlock.
Right.
Yeah. Quite interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I was saying, in comparison with a lot of those doppelgangers, like you've got the multi-armed Spider-Man who has the spider eyes and that sort of thing. They were all sort of one-off, where they'd come back for very small parts, but they were sort of the visual and nothing else. That was the appeal of them. With Moonshade, Moonshade has its, I'm not really sure what you'd refer to him as, own direction, desires, goals in mind, and also introduces the idea that he is not necessarily just the doppelganger. He is another version of Moon Knight, which opens up this whole visiting other worlds and seeing all kinds of different Moon Knights along the way.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. Not that I'm saying that they were intending this during this run as well, but we see later on in the Max Bemis run, I'm going to pull it out here, 189, the second issue that he did. We see this Moon Knight legacy of there being Moon Knights before Mark Spector. Now, this is different because it's the multiverse as well, but I guess it kind of opened that door a little to have a peek at Mark Spector. He's not the one and only Moon Knight. There are plenty of others. Right. And this multiverse certainly did throw up a lot of it. I think, again, a lot of loonies love this issue. We've talked about it a few times on the show. We see the likes of, is it like the Space Ghost kind of like Moon
Yeah,
Knight,
there's a
Batman.
there's a Space Ghost. There's the Spirit kind of Moon Knight. There is a couple of different versions of Moon Knight. So the biggest one is the one towards the end, which is sort of the classic "Let's go, chum" kind of Moon Knight, or kind of. But there's a few different incarnations, and it's fun. You can sort of spot the reference, but there's also a few that are wholly unique. Like there's the Atlantis Moon Knight who happens to be a woman, and that sort of thing. So it's not, Kavanagh's having some fun with references, but he's also, throwing out some interesting ideas. What about a world where everything was underwater? What would Moon Knight look like there? It's interesting.
Yeah, actually, it gives the food for a lot of thought, and we do see that again extended in some way in the Jason Aaron Age of KHONSHU run, which was just recent as well, where you kind of see, other kind of versions, so to speak. And also the Cullen Bunn Moon Knight Annual. I remember Cullen Bunn saying that. I think it was edited out, but there were so many scenes that he wrote with endless types of Moon Knights. I mean, I think from the Civil War, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of fun stuff kind of there. This was kind of... Sorry?
I was just going to say, it makes sense, right? KHONSHU's been around since, the height of Egypt. It makes sense that he would have more than one acolyte. And then you add in the multiverse aspect of it. Of course, there's going to be different versions of Moon Knight out there. So it's a nice combination of those two things. Yeah,
I mean, I guess you've answered that question there, Tim, as well. But I was going to ask because...
sorry.
No, only because this did really kind of ruffle a few feathers. Not this particular, Mark Specter, but the... not this Mark Spector Moon Knight run, but the this thing as Moon Knight as a legacy. Do you think, like, this thing of a superhero legacy, do you think it's overused a bit? Look, if you look at Iron Fist, Black Panther, we've got Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, Phoenix. It's now like they're not as special as they used to be because they were kind of unique in that sense. But I do take what you say, and that makes sense logically that. Why would they be the first one? But I don't know. Do you...
I can see what you mean. With certain... It's hard. So, for Iron Fist and Black Panther, those were built into the concepts. Iron Fist is the most recent slayer of the dragon in any generation. Yep. And Black Panther is the ruler, so by nature, he's part of a legacy. I think it depends what you do with it. I think the interesting thing with Moon Knight is knowing it's out there. I think if it just became endlessly referenced, it would be a detriment to the story. But noting the fact that, this is that KHONSHU has had followers for decades, hundreds of years, makes sense. And they don't necessarily have to be Moon Knight either. They can just be. The worshippers of KHONSHU, as in that Blood Brothers arc. You have the cult there. Yep. They are obsessed with KHONSHU. They want the power for themselves. So there's only one Moon Knight, yes, but there are all these figures that have worshipped KHONSHU beforehand, that have tried to be Moon Knight, that have emulated that, even if they didn't have a name for the character yet. So I think it depends what you do with it. If you use it too much, it ruins specialness, but... I think there's a certain amount of sensibility. A character who, for instance, I don't think it works for is, just to throw out an example, is like Spider-Man when they had the whole Morlon thing and the idea that he was part of a legacy character that way. I don't think that works great. For Spider-Man, the whole Spider-Verse thing worked incredibly, though. So it really depends on your approach.
That's a really good... Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So, like I said, it depends on the approach to the character. You've got to find the way it works properly. There's definitely a way to do it poorly. And like I said, I think, for me at least, Morlon was that. I didn't like the idea of Spider-Man as a supernatural character. But the Spider-Verse makes sense because, the concept of Spider-Man is whoever has the courage and has this moment of... serendipity to encounter the radioactive spider. So
that's a very good example. Actually, I never considered that, but absolutely right. I mean, that's another discussion for another day about Spider-Man. But it does open up that, because this whole Spider-Verse, and again, marketing-wise, I understand why Marvel do it, because Spider-Man's very popular. It's
Right.
understandable to tap into the Spider-Man kind of canon, but you've got to expand the universe. Similar to, I guess they do with a lot of the characters, but Spider-Man, he's one of the big ones, so absolutely, for sure. Which is also as well, Tim, I guess we will get to it later on as well. I mean, we're alluding to the second show later in the week, but it really does kind of segue a little into it about the avatars of Moon Knight, because without spoiling too much, I guess, we do see that KHONSHU has, not only once, but he has from time to time said, look, I can just ditch you anyway. He's done it also in the Houston run. And he says to Moon Knight, look, you're nothing special. If you're not going to give me what I want, I'm going to get someone else. So I guess in that sense, he's always I guess, under review, under pressure to actually perform. And I think what makes it interesting is that Mark always pushes back against KHONSHU. Yet he still manages to be the avatar of vengeance for him. So there's got to be, I guess, something special in that for Mark Specter that defines him away from the other ones. Yeah,
it does suggest that perhaps it is a two-way street more than KHONSHU would like to admit. You know, that yes, he saved Mark's life, but also, what was KHONSHU doing up until that point? You know, he was a largely forgotten god in a largely undiscovered area of Egypt, or a largely unexplored area of Egypt. So, you know, there is a symbiosis there that perhaps KHONSHU resents or doesn't want to acknowledge.
That's a great idea, actually, Tim. That idea that maybe this, I'm just putting my hat on here, fanfic hat. This idea of the god, the deity being forgotten, kind of losing the power. So he needs I guess he needs Mark to need him in order for him to be of some importance in the world. I think that's a great idea. Moving on as well, then we get during the run, there are some interesting stories. So 45, 46, Inferno, Death Watch. I've got here next, Tim, Moon Knight 47, Kavanagh introduces Hellbent. Now, this is one of the more interesting takes. And to be honest as well, Tim, I haven't reread much of this latter part of Mark Spector for a while, but I have bits and pieces here and there, and they still kind of confuse me. But we have Hellbent here, which Terry Kavanagh described as he wanted to create another division of kind of superpowered beings. So you had your mutants, you had your genetically enhanced, you had your mystical. He wanted to have this thing Hellbent, which was, I guess, to do with angels and devils, started to bring this in. So we start to get a little bit of this, and this runs through from 47 all the way to the rest, to the end, issue 60. But I don't know, interesting concept here, Tim. What did you make of Hellbent?
It's in aesthetics, it's very 90s. You know, everyone has sharp points and blades and things like that. I didn't know about the idea that it was, he intended as sort of a separate class, like mutants or Inhumans. That's fascinating to me. It's interesting for me without that knowledge in the context of just Kavanagh really goes into the supernatural with Moon Knight, which is an aspect of Moon Knight that's there from the start. I mean, his first appearance is in Werewolf by Night, so you have that sort of in his DNA, but it's rare that storylines really go deeply into that. Especially as of late, he's very much he's going to beat the hell out of some guy in an alley kind of hero, as opposed to where Kavanagh takes him, which is, very supernatural, demons and Seth the Immortal and things like that, which we'll talk about as we get closer to that. So it's, I think, a different direction, a way to dive into Moon Knight's history to get more details out of, and similar to bring back Randall Specter, that same idea that there's a bunch of stuff that got introduced when Moon Knight was popping up here and there, but didn't have his own book, and really jumping off of it, really using it well. And different than, Monch did some supernatural stuff as well, but his was far more like gothic horror. Yeah. With, I always forget her name, the Scarlet.
Stained Glass Scarlet.
Stained Glass Scarlet, yeah. So that sort of concept. Even Black Specter, he's not specifically supernatural, but he does have that kind of spooky appearance. But that was far more gothic horror, and this is, very like monster, demon kind of horror and supernatural. So I like that. It's always cool to see a writer go back and say, oh, there was this little string that nobody ever really did anything with. Let me see where I can pull that and where that'll go. Yeah,
it certainly had been a while. I mean, I'm just backtracking in my mind as well. Mark Spector Moon Knight was predominantly, the travails of Mark Spector, mercenary. It was very grounded. Early on, I think it was issue... it's a stretch here. I think issue maybe 3 or 4. There was something to do with zombies. That was a little kind of supernatural. Then just off the top of my head, 25, I think, had Ghost Rider. It wasn't supernatural, but I guess Ghost Rider, he kind of made it supernatural.
Right, and his presence does that.
And incidentally as well, that 25 was very much linked to just the Blood Brothers, which we just mentioned, 35 to 38. It was the Knights of the Moon, led by Plasma, of all people. But we see that their head honcho, which is Nephthys, she was in, that was what Terry Kavanagh brought in 35 to 38. But yeah, interesting, Hellbent, a very different take. Yeah, and for me, Tim, this latter part of Mark Spector Moon Knight really takes a turn. It just is very, I don't know, just very different in feel. I'm still, the jury's still out as to where I'd place this in my favourite runs of Mark Spector Moon Knight, because I do like Mark Spector Moon Knight. It's so funny, like, I reread it again and, tastes change and perceptions change. But this is tied into, you mentioned Set the Immortal as well, so not long after that, around issues 48 to 49 of Mark Spector Moon Knight, we start to get this development of Frenchie, of all people, as well, the Bloodline Legacy and the Knights Templar. So again, for listeners that aren't fully acquainted with what happens here, Frenchie, who up until this point, up until from the 70s till the 90s, was just your kind of like your sidekick, I guess, to Mark Spector or brother-in-arms. Totally human, totally normal. We start to get this idea that Frenchie is part of this ancient bloodline legacy where he is related to the Knights Templar, who are this faction that I guess they want to ensure history is kind of preserved or told right or something like that. So he gains like these superpowers. Like he kind of changes form here and there. And he has some links to his ancestors. What did you make of this, Tim, of like Frenchie, I guess, being changed 180, so to speak? He's totally different.
Yeah. There's aspects of it I liked. One of the things that I think makes it harder and that makes me not a huge fan of it was there's some art stuff, especially towards the tail end of the series, where it's really hard to tell the male characters apart.
Yeah.
I mean, part of that is intentional. Mark Spector is supposed to look a lot like Seth and vice versa.
Yeah.
But especially the last 3 or 4 issues, Frenchie looks exactly like them as well, but with a mustache, and the mustache isn't always very clear. It's often hard to get an idea of, and plus with all the transformations and things like that, it's really hard to get an idea of who Frenchie is in the action, who you're looking at. So I think that undermines it some. I do like the idea of Frenchie having kind of a life outside of Mark. I think that's interesting. That he is... that he exists beyond the lead character. I liked his relationship with, is the character's name just Templar, the woman in all white, who we're supposed to, I think it's a swerve, we were supposed to think she's Marlene, and she turns out not to be.
Is that like Chloe? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly, it is Chloe, yep. I think she goes by Templar. I like the fact that, he has this sort of lost love. I think that's all good for the character, but the way it ends up getting into this transformation thing, and Frenchie at the start of this arc, or start of Kavanagh's book, ends up paralyzed, and it's just weird to have that part, but also when he turns into this sort of muscle bound guy creature thing, he isn't anymore, but then he goes back. It's just there's some of the stuff gets muddy for me.
I
don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, look, and taking nothing away, because I think Kavanagh's a great writer and all that, and testament to what we were just mentioning before from the early issues up to here. I think it's good, but I just feel with this bit of Frenchie, it feels almost like Kavanagh could have used like another series and created some characters and used that, rather than try to shoehorn it into Frenchie's history. It just to me, because as you say, it got muddy. To me, it just seems like it started to. I had this feeling it started to pile on ideas over ideas, and it's like there's enough there to kind of really tear your hair out and try to grasp. But having this on top of that, to me, felt a little overwhelming. So it would be interesting. I can't remember if we touched upon this in our talk with Terry Kavanagh and Howard Mackey, but I'm wondering if they knew around this time whether the run would end at 60, that they were just trying to let's just chuck in everything that we can before it ends or not. Because the 60 is, that's a good 5-year run. 12 I think. So that's and back in those days, they're not the only one. I know Quasar had a good 60-issue run as well, so they're pretty decent. You're not going to get that these days, so I guess it's very special to have this. But it felt to me as if they were trying to jam in a lot in here. So yeah, I don't know the full workings behind it, but yeah, it was an interesting idea. Again, I mean, for me, Frenchie turning into this muscle-bound, avatar or something was just a bit too much for me. So
yeah, no. I think there's an irony there that they were, because the Knights Templar things that ends up connecting to Hellbent as well.
Yes.
In some ways, I think it was supposed to make the introduction of Hellbent easier, that, you've got this concept and these concepts and they're all connected. But instead, like you said, it makes things feel like just a pile of ideas on top of one another. Yeah. So I think the intention was to make it a little bit easier, like, oh, these things are interrelated and therefore they're easier to read. But instead, what you end up with is just this mashup of why is all this stuff connected and why are we only finding it all out at the same exact time?
Yeah.
So yeah, you might be right. If he had more time, maybe he could have teased it out more and it wouldn't have seemed as overstuffed.
Yeah. I mean, actually, as well, interestingly enough, I did a little bit of research as well, and the Knights Templar in Marvel, this is not the first time as well. I thought it was, actually. I thought Kavanagh actually introduced this, but apparently, if I am to read Wiki fandom as correct, 1983 in Thor, that was the first appearance of the Knights Templar. Now, I don't know if these are the characters that we see in Mark Spector Moon Knight, or if indeed this is the same kind of faction, but it kind of shows that maybe Kavanagh was tapping into something older as well, wanted to bring an obscure kind of group back and maybe revitalize it and link it in with Hellbent and all that sort of stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But so then we get, I guess, from Moon Knight, we got the last 10 issues here, and look, apart from some really cool cameos here, Knight's Gambit, with Gambit, obviously, issues 52, 53. Tim, I guess the main thing I would like to touch upon, Seth the Immortal, that you were talking about. Anything else there that you would like to make a note of this character? I mean, he was pretty big, in the whole scheme of things for Mark Spector up until the end.
Yeah, he's kind of a character that is all about moving the action forward, but isn't much of a character himself, if that makes sense. He is an antagonist, and he looks kind of like Mark, and he keeps changing into these different things. At one point he's like a sort of a pink gargoyle kind of looking guy, and another point he seems like he might be a vampire. He dissolves a guy's skin. He's sort of he's a collection of a lot of different sort of gruesome powers, but there's not much there for me.
Yeah.
The sort of most interesting stuff that comes out of it is tangential, which is the whole Specter Corp.
Yes, actually should have mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah, corporation machinations. That ends with Marlene sort of owning Specter Corp in a bid to save it. Maybe it's a little hard towards the end to see to figure out exactly what her game plan is. Yeah. Again, I think a victim of a little bit of rushing towards the end. But the character himself, I didn't really he didn't have a lot for me to get my hooks into. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, largely for me, an uninteresting character. I mean, apart from that kind of really, I guess, ambiguous connection, looking like Mark Spector and this thing. Seth, I actually thought as well, I was just thinking Set, it's probably a play on that. And the immediate thing I thought of was there's that Thor Villain Set, which is very much more Egyptian kind of looking. He's got one of his hands he's handless in one of his arms. Very cool. He was back in the 80s. This for me, I don't know, this character, I didn't know really what to make of him. Obviously very powerful, but very just ambiguous as to who or what really he is. Again, I'll need to read through all these again thoroughly, which I plan on doing because I really do like giving second chances to some of the things that I found very difficult to read. But this certainly was that in the beginning. I mean, not only that as well, Tim, I mean, to wrap up, a couple of things, Infinity Crusade crossover, there was 57, that whole thing. I don't know what you thought of the Infinity Crusade, but for me, that was, pretty poor as crossovers go, to tie off that trilogy, and the death of Mark Spector as well, which we see Mark Spector, that, which is a big thing. But Infinity Crusade. Any final thoughts there?
The only thing, it's a huge. Mark's issue is a huge crossover, so there's a ton of characters, and he gets a little bit of. Hey, you did a good job there, which is always nice to see, especially going back to issue 50 where it seems like he's going to get bounced out of the Avengers and instead he quits. He lights his card on fire, which has one of the cooler covers of the era. It's a die cutout of the burning, of the burning card, but it was neat. But it was sort of nice to have people recognize that he can be, a good hero in the context of 57. But the issue itself is meh. Yeah. And again, I blame that more on the fact that Infinity Crusade as a whole is not a particularly interesting storyline.
Nah.
So it's, limited results in part because it's hard to get blood from that particular stone.
Absolutely. And as mentioned, I guess it ends off with the death of Mark Spector, which we know is not the end because he always kind of comes back. Resurrection War, a few years later down the track. It took a few years for him to come back, but Doug Mensch brings him back in a very cool way in another arc there. But there you go, Loonies. That is just a kind of a little summary wrap-up of the Kavanagh Legacy. So again, issues 35 to 60 of the Mark Spector Moon Knight run. Go check it out if you can. It's a little hard to find unless you have all the floppies and stuff because they haven't released a complete collection of it yet. Yeah. Sporadically, actually, I don't even think... Well, not all of these are on Marvel Unlimited or Comixology as well. So you're just going to have to track them down when you can. Anyway, Loonies, let's just take a quick... Tim as well, let's take a quick short break. And when we come back, let's just wrap up with a bit of Nightlines and what's up ahead.
Tell me his name again.
Thanos.
I think I shall call him Adam.
But return to me again empty-handed, and I will bathe the Starways in your blood.
Thanks, Dad. Sounds fair.
Korvac's power grows, as does his madness. He would have destroyed us all, had I not pulled us into the Soul Gem.
Then Thanos, I'm coming for you.
After Xandar, you were going to kill my father?
You dare to oppose me?
You see what he has turned me into. You kill him, I will help you destroy 1,000 planets.
It's all right, Adam. We're here to help. Just stay cool. I don't want to be here!
Resurrections, an Adam Warlock and Thanos podcast. 5 years and going strong. Every other week. Mostly. For all of your Adam Warlock, Thanos, or Marvel cosmic needs. Find it on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever else podcasts are available. resurrectionsadamwarlock.tumblr.com.
Adam Warlock, you cannot keep leaving your philosophy books open on the floor. I always trip on them in the middle of the night on my way to the can.
Yes, welcome back, Looney listeners. You are listening to Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. I am joined by Tim Stevens. Tim, how are you? From the psych ward. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent. And Tim and I, we just talked about the Kavanagh Legacy, which is a very interesting run. Interesting to hear your thoughts as well, Looney. So please do just send in your thoughts of what you thought of these issues 35 to 60. I'm sure it's very, I think, varied as to what people made of these issues. Some people love it. Some people love this. Actually, this is a question as well, Tim. Stephen Platt, did you enjoy his art towards the end?
Not really. The thing about Stephen Platt is the covers to those last 5 issues, I think, are great. You know, there's the one where he's Moon Knight seems like his costume's getting stripped off by bullets.
Yep.
There's the actual last issue where he's sort of lying in the moon, the crescent moon. There's a couple others in there. They're really great covers. However, when you get into the sequential art, it gets pretty rough. The layouts are kind of funny. The layouts might have been interesting, I think, if he was just a clearer artist. Yeah. There's shades of McFarlane in there, but McFarlane, regardless of how I feel about him, you can tell the difference between characters and things like that. Stephen Platt has a bit more of a harder time differentiating, especially between the male characters. So that was my reaction.
I know, totally fair as well. And, I know a couple of the loonies do like Stephen Platt's artwork. For the most part, he's quite hard to get your head around, so to speak. Let's just leave it like that. Night Lines, Loonies here. Now, just got a couple of bits of feedback for an episode a few episodes ago, episode 193. So this came via YouTube. So a big shout out to CMK7. Beep boop, beep boop boop. That's Chris. Hello, Chris. Always good to hear from you. And Chris writes in about episode 193. Great show, guys. I'll definitely be checking out Fringe Knight. Sounds really cool. Yes, the Ellis run is so underrated. He really did do his homework. Incredible writing with so many great moments. Another line from Specter I loved is when Frenchie says he will never stop. He will go on and on using up people, spending his bottomless pit of blood money, and he cannot die. Chilling stuff. Among the many things Ellis got right about Moon Knight's character is the tragedy of Mark Specter. Being KHONSHU's avatar is a curse that Mark willingly accepts as his penance to find redemption and salvation from his guilt-ridden life, and also acceptance and affirmation from a distant god that he never got from his father. Very interesting points here, Tim. Anyway, I'm rambling, but very poignant and insightful writing. Just wish we could get more. I did read an interview with Ellis, and he said he was exhausted and drained by the last issue. So I guess he was try-harding on this run, and it shows. Thank you, Chris. Very interesting comments indeed, and I love it. It's another layer of this relationship between Mark and KHONSHU. Tim, I mean, did you like the Ellis run?
I love Ellis's run. I think the art on it is incredible. I love just sort of the way he dances through different genres. You know, you've got
absolutely
your crime, you've got the mushroom issue, which is very sort of psychedelic sci-fi. I just really appreciated how much variety he put into the character, and I love the look of Mr. Knight. You know, that business suit with the white mask is really cool. So.
Very cool. I think it put Moon Knight on the map a bit more, for a lot of people. People took attention to that. So thank you, Chris. Thank you for those words. They're really cool. Also, Colin Francois says as well from YouTube, he says first, how has this man made 3 years of a podcast talking about one character? So we had a little bit of a banter there, Colin. Absolutely. He goes on to say, I appreciate the dedication. I recently became a fan of Moon Knight after reading that trade paperback's crazy runs in the family and phases. So very interesting. You jumped on board, Colin, with the Bemis run. Again, a lot of people didn't like it that much. I didn't mind it. I liked it. It wasn't the best, but it had some interesting ideas. And it'll be interesting to hear, Colin, about your thoughts on the earlier runs as well, because oh man, if you're just dipping your toe in now, you're in for a hell of a ride. Tim, the Bemis run, any thoughts there?
I have some affection for the Bemis run. Again, to be art forward about it, I think the Bemis run had a really interesting look. I really appreciated that artwork. It's a run that felt like, again, there was a lot of ideas that maybe would have gotten to play out if we had an era where somebody could go 35, 40 issues on a title. We're just not in that era anymore.
No.
I understand why people had some difficulties with it. We talked some about the legacy stuff, but for me, it worked. It clicked. I liked a lot of it.
It had some really good ideas to say that, and I love the art. Jason Burrows, Paul Davidson, really good stuff. Ty Templeton as well. Even that issue 194 about Mark's past with his family, that was really really cool stuff. Anyway, so yeah, I mean that pretty much wraps up the feedback as well. Thank you so much, Tim. Now, would you be keen to meet up a bit later in the week to chat about our Lunatic Modern Run review?
I would be absolutely honored to do so.
Fantastic. Well, let's hope that we can make that work with schedules and such. Actually, while I have you here, I guess, Tim, as well, I mean, we will hear from you later on in the week as well. But if people wanted to contact you, have a chat with you about comics or otherwise, where can they best find you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my Twitter's probably your best bet. That is at Ungage, which is UNGAJJE. I also have a website, which is Tim Stevens is Ungage, all is one word. Stevens with a V and Ungage spelled that way again, UNGAJJE. And Moon Knight fans in particular probably want to check that out. About a month ago, I was part of a conference called the Far West Popular Culture Conference. And I did a presentation on Moon Knight, and the latest post on my website is a connection to the video for that and the slideshow, which unfortunately you can't see in the video. You just have me talking, but you can look at both at the same time via my website. And I talk about perhaps unpopular position that Moon Knight, in fact, does not have dissociative identity disorder. He's got a boatload of mental health issues, but dissociative identity disorder isn't one of them.
Awesome.
So you can go ahead and check that out.
I love it. That's meaty stuff. Loonies, do not fear as well. You can put your pens and pads down. It will be in the show notes for your ease of access as well. So go check it out. It's definitely worth looking at, especially, of course, if you love our boy, Moon Knight. Just a final thing as well before we wrap up. A little mention to our prize giveaway. So that is still running. A huge thank you to Destructo Disc Designs and Meteor Patrol for I guess donating and giving up some really beautiful pins of Moon Knight from them. So check out our social media page. Answer the question. I think it's a panel I'll put up there. Just let me know what issue it's from. Email us by Friday the 26th of March, and we'll announce those winners on our 200th episode in early April. So get your entries in. Next phase as well, Loonies, it's going to be towards the end of the week. It will be a waxing crescent. So Tim and I will be returning for a Lunatic Modern Run review, and we will be doing Shadowland Moon Knight #1 from 2010. Now, talking about legacies, talking about canon, talking about Randall Specter, this throws things up. So it should be a fun talk, a fun review of this issue. Once again, Tim, a huge thank you, and I'll catch you a bit later on in the week.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Loonies, you can contact us through various social platforms. You can drop us a line on email at itkmoonnight@gmail.com. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/itkmoonnight, and a Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/itkmoonnight. We are on Twitter. Our handle is at itkmoonnight, and we're on Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube. Just search for Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. We're also on Discord. Just search for the server Into the Night with a K. Please leave an iTunes rating or review if you can. It helps us reach other loonies out there too. Also, if you have any feedback, we also look to improve ourselves and the show. Finally, we're on all good podcast catchers: Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, also on Podcoin. Please check us out and share episodes with your friends.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.